What kind of person walks into a corporate parking garage wearing a hard hat, tinted glasses, and a face mask, then methodically spray paints a dozen security cameras with blue paint before killing a man and staging his body to look like he died of natural causes? The answer is a veterinarian, a well-respected, college-educated animal doctor from a small Oregon town who ran his own clinic, treated people's pets for over 20 years, and, according to the two detectives who took him down, kept a cardboard cutout of his own face taped to a photograph of an oiled-up male body with a dog paw tattoo over the heart, hidden behind a mirror in his bedroom. The same man who maintained a shrine to a married woman in his nightstand. The same man who purchased two separate vehicles under false identities just to follow one person. And the same man who, when police body cam footage captured him being pulled over for tailing the victim on the highway, openly told the officer, "I am following him." His name was Stephen Milner. He murdered a man named Kenneth Fandrich in Hillsboro, Oregon, on January 27, 2023, and the cameras he tried to blind are the very things that proved he did it. Before we continue, welcome to Unsolved Cold Cases. This is a case where the killer spent months planning every detail. The disguises, the burner vehicles, the spray paint, the staged crime scene, and was undone because the cameras he covered still captured enough to identify him. I'm curious, where in the world are you watching from today? Let me know in the comments, and it helps us build a community of people who believe these voices should be remembered. Kenneth Carl Fandrich was born in the 1960s to Judy and Frank Fandrich. He grew up alongside his two brothers, Lance and Richard, in a close-knit family. He graduated from Estacada High School in the Portland, Oregon area and pursued higher education before making a bold decision. He moved to Alaska. In Alaska, Kenny built a career in commercial fishing on the Bering Sea, one of the most dangerous occupations in the world. He then founded an underwater welding company, which became a successful venture. He was the kind of man who gravitated toward hard, physical, consequential work, the kind of work that demands focus and courage, where mistakes have real consequences. In his mid-20s, Kenny met Tanya. They married when he was around 26 years old. The couple eventually moved to Oregon to start the next chapter of their lives. Kenny operated a successful business before securing a position as a contract pipe fitter at Intel's Ronler Acres campus in Hillsboro, one of the largest semiconductor manufacturing facilities in the world. When he was not working, he was outdoors, hunting, skiing, snowboarding, four-wheeling, fishing, snowmachining. He was a man who built things, fixed things, and moved through the world with his hands. By 2017, Kenny and Tanya had been married for roughly 24 years. They had built a life together in Oregon City, and like many long marriages, theirs had gone through difficult stretches. During one of those stretches, Tanya made a decision that would eventually cost Kenny his life. Tanya Fandrich had worked as a veterinary technician at a small animal clinic in Oregon City since approximately 2000. She was one of the first employees hired when the clinic opened. The veterinarian who owned and operated the practice was Stephen Neil Milner. Milner was an Oregon native from the small coastal town of Tillamook. He had attended Oregon State University and earned his doctorate in veterinary medicine. He opened his own clinic in Oregon City and built a respectable practice over 2 decades, the kind of small-town vet people trusted with their aging dogs and nervous cats. He was educated, articulate, and by all outward appearances, a stable and successful professional. For 17 years, the relationship between Tanya and Milner was professional. Then, in 2017, during a period when Tanya and Kenny were having problems in their marriage, Milner began paying her personal attention. An affair began. According to Tanya's later accounts, the relationship lasted approximately 5 months before Kenny discovered it. He came home one evening to find Tanya gone. He drove to Milner's house and found her there. Kenny did not make a scene. He did not confront Milner violently. He left quietly and began making phone calls, trying to understand what had happened to his marriage. The affair was exposed. Tanya ended the relationship with Milner immediately. She later said that the moment Kenny left home, she realized how wrong she had been. She described it as a moment of clarity, the kind that arrives only when you see the damage you have caused reflected in someone else's face. Kenny forgave her, but he came home. They began the long, difficult process of trying to rebuild what had been broken. For 24 years they had been together, and Kenny chose to fight for the marriage rather than walk away from it. But Stephen Milner did not accept the ending. In his mind, the story was not over. It was only beginning. What started next was one of the most documented, most prolonged, and most deadly stalking escalations in Oregon criminal history. A campaign of harassment, surveillance, and psychological warfare that lasted 5 years and ended with a man dead in a parking garage. The harassment started with anonymous threatening letters delivered to the Fandrich home in late 2017. Then came eerie phone calls. Then came the physical surveillance, Milner showing up on their property in the middle of the night. In-home security cameras at the Fandrich residence captured Milner sneaking onto the grounds after dark on multiple occasions. As the behavior escalated, Kenny discovered something that transformed the situation from unsettling to terrifying. He found GPS tracking devices attached to his car, then more on Tanya's car. Milner was monitoring their movements in real time, where they drove, when they left, how long they stayed. He knew their routes, their schedules, their patterns. But Milner's campaign went beyond surveillance. During his own trial testimony, he admitted to orchestrating an elaborate scheme to destroy the Fandrich's marriage from the inside. He sent fabricated photographs to the family home designed to make it appear that Kenny had fathered a child with another woman. He planted a condom wrapper in one of their vehicles to create suspicion. When his attorney asked him what he was thinking, Milner answered with chilling directness. He said he was trying to push them into breaking up. He said he was trying to push them toward the edge. In his mind, he was not a stalker. He was a rescuer. Detectives who later investigated the case said Milner believed he needed to save Tanya from Kenny, that Kenny was the villain and Milner was the white knight waiting to take his place. The delusion was total and unyielding. Kenny filed for a temporary restraining order against Milner in 2019. That same year, Tanya finally quit Milner's veterinary clinic to get away from him. But the moment the restraining order expired, Milner returned to his old behavior. The stalking resumed and worsened. He began leaving notes on Tanya's car at her new workplace. He visited her new job. He continued showing up at the Fandrich property after dark. Kenny's attorney, Michael Fuller, later described the toll this took on his client. He said the stalking had basically consumed Kenny's life. Kenny was terrified. He was stressed to the point that in March 2022, after a confrontation with Tanya about the ongoing situation, he was so distressed that he crashed his car. Police body cam footage captured him at the scene, shaken and exhausted, telling the responding officer that he and his wife had been fighting. 2 weeks before the crash, something remarkable happened. In March 2022, Kenny was driving from Oregon City to his job at Intel in Hillsborough, a 45-minute commute, when he realized he was being followed. He recognized the vehicle. It was Milner. Kenny called the police. Hillsborough police pulled Milner over. The body cam footage from that traffic stop is extraordinary. When the officer asked Milner if he knew why he was being stopped, Milner said yes. He said he was trying to get a hold of the man he was following. The officer, stunned by the casual admission, gave him a firm warning. He told Milner to leave them alone. He told him that Kenny wanted nothing to do with him, that Tanya wanted nothing to do with him. He told him that if he showed up at their house, if he contacted them in any way, he would go to jail. Milner's response on the body cam was dismissive. He said he was the only person who cared, and he was not allowed to care. After that traffic stop, Kenny and Tanya were granted a new stalking protective order in March 2022. Milner was arrested for violating it the following month. He was released on conditional bail, and that is when the planning began. Think about the sheer audacity of what happened next. A man was arrested for stalking, released on bail, and then used his time on conditional release to plan the murder of the person he had been stalking. What does that tell you about how the system handles these cases? Let me know in the comments. In October 2022, Stephen Milner purchased a vehicle on Craigslist, not to drive to work, not for personal use. He bought it specifically to follow Kenneth Vandrich to his workplace at Intel without being recognized. Detectives who later investigated the case called it a burner car, the automotive equivalent of a prepaid phone. A vehicle purchased for one purpose and discarded after use. On December 13th, 2022, while Intel's own surveillance cameras captured Milner arriving at the Ronner Acres parking structure. He was wearing a disguise. While inside the garage, he used spray paint to cover several security cameras, specifically the ones monitoring the area where Kenny typically parked his car. He was not there to kill anyone that day. He was testing Intel's security response. He wanted to see how quickly the company noticed the blinded cameras and how aggressively they investigated. The answer, apparently, was not quickly or aggressively enough for him to abandon his plan. Over the following weeks, Milner returned to the Intel parking structure repeatedly. He was studying Kenny's patterns, what time he arrived, what time he left, where he parked, how the garage cleared out at the end of a shift. He was learning the rhythms of his victim's workday with the patience and precision of a predator studying a watering hole. In early January 2023, Milner purchased a second vehicle, a maroon minivan, using a false identity. He now had two burner cars, two vehicles that could not be traced to his name, two vehicles that no one at Intel or in Kenny's life would recognize. He was building the infrastructure of a murder, piece by piece, over months, while out on bail for the very crime that made all of this possible. January 27th, 2023, the day. Early that morning, Stephen Milner drove to the Intel Ronner Acres campus in Hillsborough. He entered the parking garage wearing a disguise, a face mask, tinted glasses, and a yellow hard hat. He looked like a construction worker. He looked like someone who belonged in the building. He moved through the garage with purpose, carrying a can of blue spray paint. One by one, he approached the security cameras in the area around Kenny Vandrich's usual parking spot and painted over the lenses. He had done this before, 6 weeks earlier, as a test. This time was different. This time, he was not leaving. After blinding the cameras, Milner left the parking garage. He returned shortly afterward in the maroon minivan and parked it directly next to Kenny's car. Then he waited. He sat inside that minivan for hours, waiting for Kenny's shift to end, waiting for the moment his target would walk back to his car at the end of the day. Kenny Vandrich finished work and walked to his vehicle in the parking garage sometime that afternoon. He reached his car and Stephen Milner, the veterinarian, the animal doctor, like the man who had spent 20 years healing creatures, ambushed him from behind. Milner grabbed Kenny in a chokehold. He locked his arm around Kenny's neck and squeezed. The autopsy would later reveal that Kenneth Fandrick died from blunt compression trauma to his neck and spine. The injuries were consistent with a sustained, deliberate chokehold applied with lethal force. After Kenny was dead, Milner did something that revealed the depth of his planning. He did not flee. He did not panic. He did not leave the body where it fell. Instead, he carried out what appears to have been a rehearsed staging protocol. He dragged or carried Kenny's body from the minivan back to Kenny's own car. He placed Kenny in the driver's seat. He arranged Kenny's belongings around him. His bag, his personal items, everything positioned to suggest a man who had sat down in his car after work and simply stopped breathing. The staging was meticulous. It was designed to fool the first person who found him. It was designed to look like a heart attack, a stroke, a medical event, anything other than what it actually was. The medical examiner would later note that without the autopsy revealing injuries to Kenny's neck and spine, the staging might have worked. The bruising and trauma were not immediately visible to the naked eye. A less thorough initial examination could have classified the death as natural. Milner understood this. He had planned for it. He was a doctor, not of human medicine, but of medicine nonetheless. He understood anatomy. He understood what a chokehold does to the cervical spine. And he understood that the absence of visible blood or wounds is what makes strangulation the preferred method of killers who want their crimes to disappear. Then Milner drove out of the garage in the maroon minivan and vanished into the evening traffic. That evening, when Kenny did not come home, Tanya Fandrich called police to report him missing. It was not the first time she had called police about a crisis connected to Stephen Milner, but this time, the fear in her voice carried a different weight. Kenny always came home. He was reliable in the way that men who have worked dangerous jobs their entire lives are reliable. He understood that people depend on you, and he showed up. Officers responded to the Intel campus and found Kenny's car in the parking garage. He was inside, slumped in the driver's seat. At first glance, and the scene looked unremarkable, a middle-aged man in a work vehicle who appeared to have suffered a medical event. There was no blood, no broken glass, no signs of a struggle around the vehicle. If Milner's staging had held, if the autopsy had been cursory, the death might have been classified as cardiac arrest or stroke, a tragic but natural event. Then they noticed the cameras, blue spray paint covering the lenses of multiple security cameras in the area around Kenny's parking spot. That single detail, the blue paint, collapsed the entire fiction Milner had constructed. You do not spray paint security cameras before a heart attack. The discovery transformed the scene from a medical response to a homicide investigation in an instant. Intel security personnel immediately provided investigators with recordings from their hundreds of cameras throughout the facility, and here is the detail that undid Stephen Milner's entire plan. The spray paint did not cover everything the cameras recorded. Some cameras captured partial footage before the paint obscured them. Others, at different angles, recorded the masked figure moving through the garage with the can of spray paint, the hard hat, the tinted glasses, the face mask, the deliberate movements of a man who believed he was invisible. Police now had images of their suspect. They had footage of the disguised figure spray painting cameras. They had footage of the maroon minivan entering and leaving the garage. And that same night, when they spoke with Tanya Fandrich, she told them immediately Kenny had a stalker, a veterinarian named Stephen Milner. Hillsborough police detectives Stephanie Winter and Devin Rigo took the case. They began pulling search warrants within hours of Milner's arrest on January 31st, just 4 days after the murder. They obtained warrants for his DNA, his home, and his vehicles, and what they found inside his house told a story that went far beyond obsession. Behind a mirror in Milner's bedroom, they found a cardboard cutout of his own face, placed on a photograph of a muscular, oiled male body with a dog paw tattoo over the heart. In his nightstand, they found what they described as a shrine to Tanya, a collection of items devoted to a woman who had ended their relationship years earlier and wanted nothing to do with him. Detective Stephanie Winter later described the discovery with understatement. She called it very odd memorabilia to have in your bedroom. The detectives also traced the burner vehicles. The maroon minivan had been flagged at a nearby Home Depot parking lot before the murder, and its VIN number had been recorded. Security footage showed the van leaving the Home Depot lot shortly before Kenny was killed. After the murder, Milner had dumped the minivan on the side of I-5 in North Portland, where it was towed by the Oregon Department of Transportation. Detective Rigo raced to the scrapyard where the towed van had been sold. He needed the van. It was a primary crime scene, the place where Kenny had likely been killed before being staged in his own car. But when Rigo arrived, the scrapyard owner showed him a video, and the maroon minivan, his key piece of evidence, had been picked up by a crane and crushed into scrap metal exactly 1 week before he got there. Rigo later said he watched one of his key pieces of evidence be crushed and taken away before his very eyes. Despite the loss of the minivan, the remaining evidence was substantial. The DNA, the GPS tracking devices, the spray-painted cameras, the Intel surveillance footage, the burner car purchases, the Craigslist transaction records, the body cam footage from the 2022 traffic stop showing Milner openly admitting he was following Kenny, the years of documented stalking, the violated protective orders, the letters, the calls, the shrine, the cardboard cutout. At every layer of evidence pointed to a man who had been escalating toward this moment for years and had finally carried out the plan he had been refining for months. Stephen Milner was arrested on January 31st, 2023, and charged with second-degree murder, stalking, and 7 counts of violating a stalking protective order. He initially pleaded not guilty. His trial took place in January 2025 in Washington County, nearly 2 years after the murder. The prosecution was led by Senior Deputy District Attorney John Gerhard and Deputy District Attorney Mahale Striblo, who presented the case before Judge Eric Bucher. Milner took the stand in his own defense, a decision that allowed the jury to hear him speak and assess his credibility directly. And he told the jury that Kenny had attacked him in the parking garage and that he had acted in self-defense. He claimed the chokehold was a response to aggression, not a premeditated execution. The jury rejected this claim entirely. The evidence of months of premeditation, the burner cars, the false identities, the disguises, the spray-painted cameras, the rehearsal run in December 2022, the surveillance of Kenny's daily patterns, the staging of the body, was irreconcilable with any theory of self-defense. You do not buy 2 anonymous vehicles and spray-paint security cameras because you anticipate being attacked. You do not purchase a minivan under a false name and park it next to your victim's car and wait for hours because you are afraid. Every action Milner took in the months leading up to January 27th was the action of a predator preparing an ambush, not a man preparing a defense. Prosecutor Streblo later reflected on Milner's testimony about his earlier schemes to destroy the Fandrich's marriage. When she asked about the fake photographs he had sent, Milner admitted he was trying to push them into breaking up. When she asked about the planted condom wrapper, he said he was trying to push them toward the edge. The casual cruelty of those admissions, delivered under oath in the same trial where he claimed self-defense, undercut any remaining sympathy the jury might have had. On January 22nd, 2025, the jury found Stephen Milner guilty of second-degree murder, stalking, and all 7 counts of violating the protective order. At sentencing on February 18, 2025, Tanya Fandrick delivered a statement to the court. She described years of fear and intimidation. She described how Milner had infiltrated every aspect of her life in a bid for control. She described how his interference had created turmoil in her marriage and contributed to the emotional breakdown of the man she loved. Milner was sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 25 years. He received an additional 6 years for the stalking violations. He is currently incarcerated at Snake River Correctional Institution in Ontario, Oregon. Sergeant Kelly Fraze, who worked on the case, described what the investigation revealed about how stalking can escalate. Detective Winter, who traced the security footage camera by camera and helped build the timeline of Milner's movements, later spoke about the case on CBS's 48 Hours. The episode, titled Murder in the Parking Garage, aired in October 2025 and laid out the full scope of Milner's obsession and the detective work that brought him down. Kenneth Vandrich was 56 years old when he was murdered in a parking garage at the end of a workday. He was a pipe fitter, an underwater welder, a Bering Sea fisherman, a husband who forgave his wife and tried to save his marriage. He spent the last 5 years of his life being stalked by a man he never provoked, never threatened, and never wronged. His only offense was being married to a woman that Stephen Milner refused to let go. Kenny did everything right. He called the police. He filed restraining orders. He hired an attorney. He documented the harassment. He reported every violation. Conti followed every instruction the system gave him, and the system, the protective orders, the bail conditions, the criminal charges that were already pending, failed to stop the man who killed him. The cameras in the Intel parking garage were supposed to be one more layer of protection. Milner spray-painted over them with blue paint because he understood that cameras are how killers get caught, but the paint did not cover everything. The cameras caught partial images of his disguise. They caught the minivan. They caught the timeline. They recorded the very evidence that Milner spent months trying to prevent from ever existing. He planned for everything except the possibility that the cameras would still see. Kenneth Fandrick's brothers, Lance and Richard, his mother Judy, and his wife Tanya survive him. His legacy is not the parking garage where he died. His legacy is the Bering Sea, the welding torch, the ski slopes, and the 24-year marriage he fought to keep. The man who killed him will spend the rest of his life in a cell in eastern Oregon, surrounded by high desert and silence, with nothing but time to contemplate the shrine he built to a woman who never wanted him. If you found this case important, do not forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. We post crime case videos every night. Until next time, stay sharp, stay vigilant.